in a wildlife sanctuary where Davis Okoye, a primatologist with a military background, cares for the animals. Davis is seen looking after George, who has grown into a strong, intelligent gorilla. The bond between them is clear, as Davis has raised George since he was a baby, and they communicate with each other as friends. Davis is a quiet, reserved man who avoids close contact with people, but has formed an extraordinary relationship with George. He speaks to George like a friend, telling him things others might not say to animals, showing a deep affection. While at the sanctuary, we learn that Davis works hard to protect the animals, especially George. He takes pride in caring for the animals, ensuring their safety and comfort. George, despite his size and strength, is shown to be very gentle. The scene where they share a playful moment where Davis makes George laugh by mimicking his expressions emphasizes their strong connection. However, things start to take a sudden turn when a mysterious spaceship crashes into the forest nearby. The wreckage contains a strange canister, which opens and releases a dangerous pathogen into the environment. This substance, though unseen by Davis and his team, travels through the jungle and comes into contact with George. Soon after, George begins to exhibit strange symptoms, becoming more aggressive and physically larger, much to Davis's worry. At first, Davis does not realize the severity of the situation. He thinks that George's behavior might be related to the stress of captivity or something more minor. However, the gorilla's increasingly erratic behavior and noticeable changes, his growing size and strength, make it clear that something is very wrong. Davis, seeing George's transformation, decides to seek help from outside the sanctuary to figure out what has happened to his friend. Little does he know, this is the beginning of a much larger disaster. After George's strange transformation begins, Davis seeks out Dr. Kate Caldwell, a former scientist at a company called Energy Neen, who specializes in genetics. Davis and Kate's first meeting isn't friendly. She's reluctant to trust him, and he is skeptical of her knowledge. But when she examines George, Kate immediately recognizes that the gorilla's condition isn't normal. She discovers that George has been infected with a dangerous genetic pathogen, a product of Energen's illegal experiments with DNA manipulation. Kate explains that the pathogen, a chemical compound from the crashed spaceship, has altered George's genetics, turning him into something far more dangerous. This same pathogen was responsible for the mutations in other animals that Energy had been experimenting on, animals like Ralph, a wolf, and Lizzie, a crocodile. She warns that these creatures could grow out of control if they are not stopped soon. Davis, frustrated and frightened for George's well-being, feels conflicted. George was his family, his friend, and he couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Yet, the animal's transformation was out of Davis's control. Davis and Kate, both feeling the weight of the situation, agree to work together to find a solution. They know that the mutated creatures are a growing threat, and the company's involvement in the situation makes it more complicated. At this point, the movie introduces the villainous corporate duo, Claire Wyden and her brother Brett Wyden. They are the heads of Energene and are willing to stop at nothing to protect their corporate interests. Claire is ruthless, dismissive of any lives lost in the pursuit of profits, and determined to cover up the consequences of their genetic experiments. Meanwhile, Brett, her nervous, inexperienced brother, proves to be more concerned about his own safety than the well-being of the world. Together, they oversee the ongoing experiments and the mutations, unaware of the rapidly growing crisis their actions have caused. Meanwhile, George's transformation becomes more evident. His strength increases exponentially, and he begins to lash out uncontrollably, destroying parts of the sanctuary. Despite the deep connection they share, Davis is forced to confront the reality that the friend he once knew is no longer the same. Desperate to stop the mutations from spreading further, Davis and Kate learn about the locations of the other animals affected by the pathogen, Ralph, who is causing destruction in a nearby town, and Lizzie, the mutated crocodile, whose rage is unmatched. To make matters worse, the mutations are growing exponentially, meaning that if these creatures are not stopped soon, they will destroy everything in their path. The situation escalates when Ralph, the mutated wolf, appears in a small town. His mutation is just as severe as George's, and his transformation into a gargantuan, terrifying predator makes him an immediate threat. The military responds to the town's destruction, but Ralph's strength and speed overwhelm them. He easily outruns their vehicles and destroys everything in his path. The wolf's savage behavior, a result of the pathogen's influence, proves to be a devastating force. This is when we see the military's helplessness in the face of these mutant creatures, realizing that conventional weapons will not be enough to stop them. Simultaneously, in a remote swamp, Lizzie, the mutated crocodile, has grown to an enormous size. She terrorizes her environment, emerging from the water and attacking anything nearby. Lizzie's mutation has given her a thick, armored body, and her destructive strength makes her almost indestructible. Her appearance is equally terrifying, with her scaly skin now covered in dark, jagged patterns from the genetic alteration. As she rampages through the water, creating chaos and fear, we get a sense of how dangerous and unpredictable these creatures have become. Davis, determined to save George from the same fate, takes action. He and Kate travel together, navigating their way through the chaos and destruction left in the wake of the mutated animals. Along the way, Davis learns more about Energene's dark secrets. how they've been manipulating DNA to create super soldiers, and how the pathogen was an accident, an unforeseen side effect of their desire for profit and power. The connection between George and Davis is tested as they track down the other mutated animals. George's behavior grows more violent. His size continues to increase, and the bond they share feels increasingly strained. Davis fears that George may no longer recognize him, but he doesn't give up. He continues to fight for his friend, knowing that if anyone can bring George back from the brink, it's him. Meanwhile, Energini's mercenaries are in hot pursuit, trying to capture George and the other mutated creatures. The Wyden siblings, fearing the loss of their control over the situation, are doing everything in their power to cover up the results of their failed experiments. Their plan includes eliminating anyone who gets in their way, including Davis and Kate. As the stakes rise, the tension mounts, and it becomes clear that the race to stop the mutated creatures has reached its breaking point. As Davis and Kate continue their journey to stop the mutated creatures, they encounter more obstacles. The military and Energi's forces are in hot pursuit, intent on capturing or eliminating them to prevent the truth from getting out. The stakes grow higher as Davis, while trying to protect George, finds himself in increasingly dangerous situations. The team tracks Ralph's rampage to the heart of a large urban area. The wolf's mutated size and speed cause widespread destruction as he leaps from building to building, knocking over cars and terrorizing civilians. The military, using all available resources, attempts to neutralize Ralph, but conventional weapons prove ineffective. Missiles and bombs explode around him, but Ralph only becomes more enraged and harder to contain. His sheer power is unmatched, and the government forces are unable to stop him. Meanwhile, Lizzie's destructive path leads her to a city on the coast. Her size is terrifying, and she easily crushes buildings underfoot as she moves through the streets, causing chaos. Her thick, armored skin makes her almost impervious to gunfire and explosives, so the military struggles to stop her. Davis and Kate realize that if they are going to have any chance of saving the city and the world, they need to stop both Ralph and Lizzie before they reach the major metropolitan areas. As the team moves from city to city, trying to find the mutated creatures before they do more damage, they are forced to rely on their wits and resources. Davis's military training helps him avoid capture by Energini's mercenaries, while Kate's knowledge of genetics offers critical insights into how to stop the creature's mutations from worsening. Together, they form a bond of mutual respect, their teamwork growing stronger as they face impossible odds. The chase takes them across the country, from one destroyed location to another, until they finally realize that all the creatures are heading toward Chicago. The large city, already vulnerable from the ongoing destruction, is now their last stand. The monster's presence in Chicago means that the final showdown is imminent, and both Davis and Kate know that they don't have much time to stop them before it's too late. As the monsters converge on Chicago, Davis's urgency intensifies. He feels a deep responsibility for George's well-being, knowing that if he can't find a way to help his friend, George could end up being destroyed along with the rest of the creatures. With every minute that passes, the danger becomes more real. They are racing against time to stop the inevitable. The climax of the film takes place in Chicago, where the mutated creatures George, Ralph, and Lizzie are wreaking havoc. The military, struggling to stop them, launches an all-out assault with helicopters and tanks, but Ralph's agility and Lizzie's armored hide make them nearly impossible to defeat. The city is in chaos, with buildings collapsing and civilians fleeing in fear. It's either barren or miserable outside of cities. What can be more barren, more miserable, perhaps beyond burns or decay? Amid the destruction, Davis realizes that the key to stopping George is reaching him emotionally, as he knows George still has a part of his old self inside. George, caught between the mutation and their bond, is caught in a fierce battle with Ralph and Lizzie, who are out of control. Meanwhile, Energini's leaders, Claire and Brett Wyden, are determined to cover up their failed experiments by launching a satellite weapon that can destroy the creatures from space. Davis, desperate to stop them, infiltrates Energini's headquarters with Kate and the military. They fight through mercenaries and security to reach the control room, where Claire is preparing to fire the satellite weapon. As the satellite weapon powers up, Davis makes a final attempt to save George. He injects George with a sedative to calm him down, and for a brief moment George regains control. Davis then disables the satellite weapon just before it fires. In the chaos that follows, Lizzie breaks free and starts to attack again. Using a crane, Davis hurls debris to trap Lizzie, ending her rampage. Finally, Ralph collapses, and George, once again in control, helps Davis take down the remaining forces. The battle ends with the creatures subdued, but the city remains in ruins. The threat is over, but the aftermath is felt. With the final battle over, the aftermath of the destruction is evident. The city is in ruins, with buildings reduced to rubble and streets flooded with debris. The military, aided by Davis, has managed to stop the rampant destruction and neutralize the mutated creatures. The government, in the wake of the destruction, decides to cover up the truth about Energini's experiments. Claire and Brett Wyden are arrested for their roles in creating the chaos, and the company's operations are shut down. Davis, having risked everything to save his friend, finds a sense of peace. The city may be broken, but his bond with George remains intact. George, though forever changed by the pathogen, is now free to live a more peaceful life, and Davis stands by his side, a silent promise of protection hanging between them. Yet, the friendship he shares with George is a reminder of the power of loyalty, and the film ends with the two of them looking out over the horizon, together at last. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth recaps and reviews. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the hidden truths in every story.